good. Done. I did the only car. It is. I know. For sure.
Good morning. Carol asked me to share the words of the piece that she's playing for our gathering music today, Bless the Beasts and the Children. The lyrics are, "Bless the beasts and the children, for in this world they have no choice. Bless the beasts and the children, for the world can never be the world they see. Light their way when the darkness surrounds them. Give them love. Let it shine all around them. Bless the beasts and the children. Give them shelter from the storm. Keep them safe. Keep them warm."
Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the South Hills, also known as Sunnyhill. We're delighted that you could join us for this service today. Our mission here at Sunnyhill is to create a more just and compassionate community within and beyond our walls. My name is Bradley Convis. I'm proud to serve as a worship associate for this congregation. If you are a newcomer or visitor to our congregation, please go to sunnyhill.org and click on the button that says New to Sunnyhill. There you can receive more information about our congregation and sign up to receive our weekly newsletter email blast. Also, if you'd like to be greeted as a newcomer after the service, please take a red mug so we can cheerfully greet you and welcome you. If you're joining us online today, please say hello or good morning in the comments feed on Facebook or YouTube. We'd like to hear from you, and that way we can extend a warm welcome to you as well. So welcome. For all those who are here in person, a gentle reminder, please silence your noisemakers and other electronic devices. That way we can enjoy the service without interruption. If you have a restless infant or toddler, please feel free to use the little quiet room in the back. There you can see and hear the service like you're almost there, but you're not disturbing anybody. Today's service is titled Freedom and Liberation. As Martin Luther King said, whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. What King was describing was the idea of collective liberation. This service explores how we might implement this idea in our own time. Our opening words were written by Martin Luther King Jr. It is not enough for us to talk about love. Love is one of the pivotal points of our faith. But there is another side called justice. And justice is really love in calculation. Justice is love correcting that which revolts against love. Please join me in saying the words for lighting our chalice today. We light our flaming chalice to illuminate the world we seek. Oh, thanks, Jim. In search for truth, may it be just. In search for justice, may we be loving. In loving, may we find peace.
Here we are. Good morning. Please rise and bow to your spirit to sing our opening hymn, Gather the Spirit.
Witness the mystery. Good morning, friends. For our time for all ages this morning, everyone is going to stay in their seats until it is time to head to class. And I have some helpers. Once upon a time, there was a girl named Rosa who loved to read her Bible. One of her favorite stories was the story of Moses and how he helped the Hebrew slaves gain freedom. Moses was a young man who lived in Egypt. He knew it wasn't right for the Hebrew people to be slaves of the Egyptian king, Pharaoh. One day, he heard a voice inside him say, "Moses, go tell Pharaoh to let my people go." The voice of conscience was loud and clear for Moses knew right from wrong. He also knew that when one's conscience speaks the truth, it's the very voice of God. Moses decided that he had to go see Pharaoh and tell him to let my people go. But when Moses told Pharaoh to free the Hebrew people from slavery, Pharaoh simply said, "No, no, 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 no." Moses said, "Be careful, Pharaoh. All God's children are born to be free. You may be a king, but every child of God has royal blood. No one on earth was born to be a slave. You may say slavery is good, but the powers of the earth and sun will rebel against that lie. The waters will turn red. The land will be filled with millions of frogs, gnats, flies, and bugs. Cows, horses, and donkeys will get sick. Hailstorms will send ice falling from the sky that beat down everything growing in the fields. Egypt will be filled with locusts, and darkness will cover the land, turning day into night. Pharaoh, you are on the side of slavery, but the universe is on the side of justice." And everything Moses said came to pass. Bad stuff started happening. Bugs, frogs, you name it, it happened. Sometimes Pharaoh would get sick and tired of all the misery, and he would tell Moses and the Hebrew people, "You're free to go." But as soon as the Hebrew people started packing their bags, Pharaoh would say, "I've changed my mind." And so they would unpack their bags. Finally, Pharaoh got tired of fighting against the cause of freedom. He got sick and tired of frogs in his food and gnats in his ears. He realized that the universe was on the side of justice, and he told Moses and his people to go. And they did. Moses and the Hebrew people marched right out of Egypt, singing.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land.
The little girl I mentioned named Rosa loved to hear the story of Moses and the Israelites walking to freedom. But as she grew up and got bigger and taller, she began to look around her at the world in which she lived and realized something. She realized that her people were not free. Everywhere Rosa looked, there were signs that said, "Whites only." Black people were not allowed in some parks, motels, lunch counters, swimming pools, and schools. They were told to sit at the back of the bus. If a white person needed the seat, then the black person had to stand up and give it up to them. Rosa believed that all people should be treated fairly, and she knew in her heart that these rules were wrong. A lot of other people agreed with her, and they agreed that they needed to challenge these unfair rules. One day, Rosa got on the bus, tired after a long day's work, and sat down. The bus went down the street a few blocks and stopped to let a lot of people who were mostly white get on board. The bus driver told some of the black passengers, including Rosa, to get up from their seats so that the white folks could sit down. Everyone obeyed the driver, except Rosa. The bus driver told her again to get up, but she still sat in her seat. The driver threatened to call the police, but Rosa still sat in her seat. Finally, the police came to take Rosa down to the station. At the police station, they fined Rosa $14, but she had started something the police could not stop. the black people of Montgomery, Alabama, decided they would not ride the bus until all people were treated fairly. This meant that the bus company would lose money. Now in Egypt, suffering meant frogs, flies, and rivers turning red. In America, suffering means losing money. After a year of boycotting by black people, the bus company took down their whites-only signs, and Rosa sat on the front seat of that bus. Rosa Parks started a movement to lead her people from oppression toward equality. And with that, we will sing our children to our RE classes, and we're going to hear some more.
So we invite you to sing along with us. Each verse, it changes a little bit, but the first one is as written, ain't gonna let nobody turn me around.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom.
Ain't gonna let injustice,
Ain't gonna let injustice turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let injustice turn me around. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom.
ain't gonna let racism,
Ain't gonna let racism turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let racism turn me around. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom.
ain't gonna let nobody,
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land.
After I share joys and sorrows, we're going to try something new today, which is to allow anyone who has any joy or sorrow that they're holding in their heart to come forward, light a candle from one of the two candles, and stick the small candle in the sand. And we'll do that while we're singing our meditation hymn. But first, I'm going to share our joys and sorrows. You can go ahead, Brett. A sorrow from Wendy Bell, who says, Michaeline Stabile and I lost a good friend this week, Georgine Monestier, after a long battle with cancer. To Wendy and Michaeline, we hold you in our hearts. A joy from Chris and Dorothy Burns. Their elder son, Ben, and wife, Leanna, announced the birth of Julian Orion Burns on January 11th in Boston. Julian is Chris and Dorothy's first grandchild, and they are on their way to meet him. Ben grew up in this congregation and says hello to everyone. To the Burns family, we hold you in our hearts. A joy from Louis Portella, who says, thanks to his spinal decompression surgery, there's a clarity of thought and a renewed sense of purpose not felt for at least a decade. The long-term, slow-building effects of that spinal cord pressure had on me, and the reversals are nothing short of amazing. At the same time, I heard that Louis is feeling it a little bit today and couldn't be with us. So to Louis, we say, we hold you in our hearts. We will now sing our meditation hymn, and as we do so, anyone who feels moved to do so, please come forward and light a candle. I would suggest you start from the back and work toward the front so as to avoid anyone setting themselves on fire.
Peace like a river, I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got tears like raindrops. I've got tears like raindrops. I've got tears like raindrops in my soul. I've got tears like raindrops. I've got tears like raindrops. I've got tears like raindrops in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul.
Please join me in the spirit of meditation or prayer. Each time we gather, we are aware of what is right in our world and in our lives and what is not. What is whole and functioning and what is less than whole. What is held in light and what is held in shadow. What is uplifting and what is burdensome. What is singing in our hearts and what is crying. Let us take this moment of silence to hold together all those things that call out to be recognized and felt. May we bathe in the river of peace. May the fountain of joy lift us up. May the ocean of love sustain us. May the pain of our arrow wounds find comfort and healing. May the raindrops of our tears cleanse our hearts and minds. And may we find the strength of the mountain to persevere. Amen. As Unitarian Universalists, we often speak proudly of our long history as religious liberals, and justifiably so. In fact, I'm going to be doing some of that in just a few minutes. Religious liberalism helped shift our understanding of religion itself from an emphasis on narrow and restrictive beliefs and doctrines toward an emphasis on rights and freedoms of the individual. In the 18th and 19th centuries, this change in emphasis helped bring about a great many social and political movements, some of whose ideas and ideals are embedded in our nation's foundational documents, including the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. But all too often, religious liberalism has focused primarily or solely on ideas rather than actions. All too often, UUs and other religious liberals have made the choice to talk about their liberalism rather than act in ways that bring about real liberation. I don't like telling UU jokes very often because they tend, in my mind, to perpetuate some of the very worst stereotypes about our tradition. But there's one that comes to mind that I share with you today as a cautionary tale. As the story goes, a group of Unitarian Universalists died and their souls were making their way to heaven. And as they journeyed on that path, there was a fork in the road. The fork to the left had a sign that said, "To heaven." The fork on the right had a sign that said, "To discussion about heaven." Invariably, the UUs chose the path to the right. It's funny, but it's also sad and can be even tragic. Thank you. If ours is a religion only of ideas rather than actions, then we become a religion that is not thriving, but dying. Living our ideals is so much more important than perfecting our arguments about our ideals. And historically, religious liberalism has been at its best when it concerns itself with action rather than theoretical discussion. As an example, on this MLK weekend, I'd like to spend some time exploring the actions of some of our UU forebears in and around Selma, Alabama, in 1965. I'm indebted for much of my text today to Mark Morrison Reed and his wonderful and very challenging book entitled The Selma Awakening: How the Civil Rights Movement Tested and Changed Unitarianism Universalism. On February 26 of 1965 in Marion, Alabama, Jimmy Lee Jackson, a 26-year-old activist and a deacon in his local Baptist church, participated in a peaceful demonstration that was held to bring attention to voter registration efforts in that area and to protest the detention of a civil rights leader in the county jail. The demonstrators' plan was to walk, singing hymns, from the church to the jail, just about a block away, and then return to the church for more prayers and singing. They were met at the post office next door to the jail by a line of Marion City police officers, sheriff's deputies, and Alabama state troopers. During the ensuing standoff, streetlights were abruptly turned off. Some sources say that they were shot out by the police, and the police began to beat the protesters. The marchers turned and scattered back toward the church. Jimmy Jackson, his mother Viola Jackson, and his 82-year-old grandfather ran into a cafe behind the church, pursued by Alabama state troopers. Police clubbed Jackson to the floor in the kitchen of the cafe. When his mother attempted to pull the police off of her son, she was also beaten. When Jackson tried to protect his mother, one trooper threw him against a wall, and the second trooper shot Jackson twice in the abdomen, which resulted in his death. Months later, a grand jury failed to bring any indictments in this case, apparently believing that the state troopers were justified out of self-defense in beating, shooting, and killing Jackson, even though he was unarmed. And this failure to indict is one of the common threads between the events of 1965 and more recent similar events. About a week and a half after the killing of Jimmy Jackson and other related violent incidents in the area, Martin Luther King Jr. sent a telegram to clergy in various denominational headquarters around the country. The telegram read as follows: "In the vicious maltreatment of defenseless citizens of Alabama, where old women and young children were gassed and clubbed at random, we have witnessed an eruption of the disease of racism which seeks to destroy all of America. No American," he said, "is without responsibility. All are involved in the sorrow that rises from Selma to contaminate every crevice of our national life. The people of Selma will struggle on for the soul of the nation, but it is fitting that all America help to bear the burden. I call, therefore, on clergy of all faiths, representative of every part of the country, to join me for a minister's march to Montgomery on Tuesday morning. In this way, all America will testify to the fact that the struggle in Selma is for the survival of democracy everywhere in our land." That telegram reached the headquarters of the Unitarian Universalist Association in Boston, and phone calls were made to virtually every UU clergy person, urging them to join the march in Selma. 177 UU ministers out of approximately 700 active UU ministers at that time, meaning about 1 of every 4, answered the call and made their way to Selma to participate in the march. Among these ministers was the Reverend James Reeb, who had recently left parish ministry and was living with his family in the Black neighborhood of Roxbury, Massachusetts, where he worked as a community relations director for the American Friends Service Committee's Boston Metropolitan Housing Program, focusing on desegregation of housing. He felt he could make more of a difference in this position than he could as a parish minister at that time. Reverend Reeb and the rest of the UU ministers and lay people who responded were among the 2,500 marchers who set forth from Selma at 3:00 p.m. on that March day in 1965, singing, "Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around." They passed ambulances at the ready, dozens of police cars who were not there, by the way, to protect them, but to intimidate them, and troopers with clubs in hand. Along the route, a federal marshal stepped forward and read aloud a court-ordered injunction against the march. The marchers went on. As they moved, they were aware that they saw no American flags on the path, only Confederate flags waving as they went by. They marched up and over the crest of the Pettus Bridge. Before them, 500 blue-helmeted Alabama state troopers blocked the highway. King halted, and with the nuns and priests and rabbis and ministers assembled, knelt and prayed. King rose, and as he did so, the troopers parted. But rather than continuing toward Montgomery, King decided to lead the marchers back toward Selma and start another day. That evening, after returning from the Pettus Bridge, a group of UU ministers headed towards Walker's Cafe, which was by then full of Black locals and white protesters. These 3 ministers, Clark Olson, Orloff Miller, and Jim Reeb, ate their dinner and then used the payphone at the cafe to call their families and let them know that they were all right. The 3 of them left the restaurant and walked toward Brown Chapel AME Church, where there was to be a meeting of those who had participated in the march. They walked 3 abreast down the street. 4 or 5 white locals came out of a variety store behind them on the opposite side of the street and began yelling at them. Olson, Miller, and Reeb sped up, but the men ran at them. Olson, who was the furthest from the curb, saw them best. He said, "They attacked us from behind. At least one carried a large club, possibly a baseball bat or length of pipe, with which he took a roundhouse swing at Jim's head." Olson and Miller heard the blow land on James Reeb's head. Reeb died from these wounds 2 days later. At a memorial service held for Reeb at the Brown AME Chapel, Martin Luther King offered a eulogy, which read in part, "Naturally, we are compelled to ask the question, who killed James Reeb? The answer is simple and rather limited when we think of the who. He was murdered by a few sick, demented, and misguided men who have the strange notion that you express dissent through murder." He continued, "There is another haunting, poignant, desperate question we are forced to ask this afternoon. that I asked a few days ago as we memorialized James Jackson. It is the question, what killed James Reeb? When we move from the who to the what, the blame is wide and the responsibility grows. James Reeb was murdered by the indifference of every minister of the gospel who has remained silent behind the sage security of stained glass windows. He was murdered by the irrelevancy of a church that will stand amid social evil and serve as a tail light rather than a headlight, an echo rather than a voice. He was murdered by the irresponsibility of every politician who has moved down the path of demagoguery, who has fed his constituents the stale bread of hatred and the spoiled meat of racism. He was murdered by the brutality of every sheriff and law enforcement agent who practices lawlessness in the name of the law. He was murdered by the timidity of a federal government that can spend millions of dollars a day to keep troops in South Vietnam, yet cannot protect the lives of its own citizens seeking their constitutional rights. So in his death, James Reeb says something to each of us, black and white alike. Says that we must substitute courage for caution. Says to us that we must be concerned not merely about who murdered him, but about the system, the way of life, the philosophy which produced the murder. His death says to us that we must work passionately, unrelentingly, to make the American dream a reality for all, so he did not die in vain. Dr. King's question is one that is just as relevant and important today as it was 58 years ago. For example, whenever we hear the news of yet another black person who has been profiled, shot, and killed, either by vigilantes or by the police, we tend to get caught up in the questions and discussions having to do with who killed these individuals and the legal and circumstantial minutia of the cases that surround their deaths. And many of these legal and technical questions are certainly important, but they tend to distract us from some of the underlying issues, the what that is involved. We saw yet another example of something like this earlier this month when a black man who happened to be the cousin of one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter was killed by Los Angeles police after being restrained and tasered multiple times while he called out to bystanders, "They're trying to George Floyd me. Lives are still being lost this way every day." It might be more useful for us to ask, as Dr. King did, not who killed these people, but what killed these people and scores of others. There is a bigger picture here that we need to be aware of, a larger issue that needs to be addressed, and it's an issue that cannot be changed or transformed merely by talking about it. What often happens in our circles is that we get stuck in liberal discussion rather than moving toward liberatory action. Some 58 years ago, a courageous group of Unitarian Universalists answered the call to make this shift from liberal discussion to liberatory action, and some of them lost their lives. Until we make this shift ourselves, none of us will be truly free. And as engaged liberals committed to justice, we have a special role to play. As Dr. King said, we who are members of congregations who say we are concerned with justice must be headlights rather than taillights. We must work passionately, unrelentingly, to make the American dream a reality for everyone, so that those who did this work before us did not labor and die in vain. When we find ourselves at a fork in the road, with a sign on one fork that reads, "Discussion about liberal ideals," and a sign on the other fork that reads, "Liberatory action," I hope and pray that we will choose the direction that leads toward real and meaningful liberation for all. May it be so. Amen.
Please rise and bow to your spirit again. For our hymn, There Is More Love Somewhere.
There is more love
Whew, that one always gets me. Today's designated offering will benefit the Black Lives of the Unitarian Universalist Association, known as BLUU. BLUU is an organizing collective that works to provide support, information, and resources for Black Unitarian Universalists, and to expand the role and visibility of Black UUs within our faith. If you'd like to make a gift via our online giving system, you can do so by going to sunnyhill.org and click on the button that says Online Giving. Then follow the instructions. Or you can give by text at 412-324-3130. You can also mail in a check if you prefer. You can find our mailing address on our website at sunnyhill.org. For those of you who are here in person, we'll pass around the basket in a moment. And everyone, thank you for your generosity. Please join me in saying the words to extinguish the chalice. Yep, sorry. And Rebecca, could I get your help with these other candles? We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Just a couple of things before we go. Reminder that at 2 o'clock this afternoon, we're having a memorial service for longtime Sunnyhill member Liz Bergman. So I encourage any of you who knew Liz to come back for that at 2 o'clock. Also, we're having, for newcomers, a starting point class next Sunday after the service. If you're interested in learning more about our congregation and about Unitarian Universalism, I encourage you to sign up for that. You can speak to Bethany Thornton, our membership director, or me, or look for news about it in our weekly newsletter, The Beat. I'll close with these words by Maya Angelou. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. Lift up your eyes upon the day breaking for you. Give birth again to the dream. Go in peace, seeking justice and liberation for all.